I remember the exact moment my son slammed the door in my face. The cold December wind hit me like a slap, and I stood there, numb, clutching the small box of my things. Christmas Eve, no less. Today, I'm going to tell you something I never thought I would share. And if for even a second this feels familiar, I only ask that you like this video and subscribe. It will help me keep opening my heart. I'm Marlene, 72 years old, a woman who thought family meant forever. I lived in a cramped one-bedroom apartment on the Lower East Side of Manhattan for 37 years. The same building where my late husband Samuel and I raised our only son, Matthew. The walls held decades of laughter, arguments, birthday candles blown out with wishes that never quite came true. Every morning, I'd wake to the sound of garbage trucks rumbling down Delancey Street. The radiator would clank and hiss, fighting against the December cold that seeped through the single-pane windows. I'd wrap my arthritic fingers around a chipped coffee mug, the one Matthew gave me for Mother's Day 15 years ago. "World's best mom," it said in faded blue letters. I'd stare at those words while sipping my instant coffee, wondering if they were still true. The apartment smelled like old wood and the lavender sachets I kept in every drawer. My husband's cologne still lingered faintly in our bedroom closet, even though he'd been gone for 8 years. I'd kept his side of the bed neat, his pillow fluffed, as if he might return from one of his business trips to Philadelphia. The loneliness had become my roommate, sitting with me at breakfast, watching television beside me, whispering doubts in my ear during the long New York nights. That Tuesday morning, 3 days before Christmas, I decided to make Matthew his favorite cookies. Chocolate chip with walnuts, the recipe my mother taught me in this very kitchen. The mixer was older than my son, but it still worked. I creamed the butter and brown sugar until my shoulder ached, folded in the chips one by one. The sweet smell filled every corner of my small world. I packed 24 cookies in an old tin, the kind that once held Danish butter cookies from the Christmas market Samuel and I used to visit in Times Square. My fingers traced the faded winter scene painted on the lid. A family gathered around a fireplace, their faces glowing with warmth and love. I used to believe that would be us someday. The subway ride to Brooklyn took 43 minutes. I counted every stop, every tunnel, every stranger who avoided eye contact. Matthew and his wife Rebecca lived in a brownstone in Park Slope, the kind of neighborhood where young families pushed expensive strollers and discussed property values over artisanal coffee. They'd bought the house 5 years ago with my help. $25,000 from my retirement savings, money Samuel had worked overtime shifts at the post office to earn. I walked up their front steps, noting how the Christmas wreath on their door was perfectly symmetrical, store-bought. Not like the ones I used to make from branches I'd gather in Central Park, woven with ribbons Matthew had chosen at the Five and Dime. My hand shook as I pressed their doorbell. Not from the cold, but from something deeper. An anticipation mixed with dread that had been growing in my chest for months. Rebecca opened the door, her blonde hair pulled back in a yoga ponytail, her smile tight and practiced. She wore expensive athleisure clothing, the kind I'd see in storefront windows but never dream of buying for myself. "Oh, Marlene. Hi." Her voice carried the same tone people use when they find unexpected guests on their doorstep. Polite but inconvenienced. "I brought cookies," I said, holding up the tin. "Matthew's favorites." She accepted the tin without looking inside. "That's sweet. He's working, though. Conference calls all day." She didn't invite me in. I could see past her shoulder into their living room. Designer furniture, a Christmas tree decorated with matching ornaments in silver and gold. No handmade decorations, no mismatched treasures collected over years of family traditions. It looked like a magazine spread, beautiful but cold. "Maybe I could just say hello quickly?" I asked. "I haven't seen him in 3 weeks." Rebecca glanced back into the house, then at her Apple Watch. "He's really busy, Marlene. Year-end stuff, you know how it is." She paused, considering. "Maybe after the holidays? Things will calm down then." After the holidays. Always after something. After his promotion, after they settled into the house, after Rebecca finished her yoga teacher training, after they got back from their vacation to Aruba that I'd seen on her Instagram posts. I wasn't on social media myself, but my neighbor Mrs. Rodriguez had shown me photos of my son and daughter-in-law sipping cocktails on white sand beaches while I spent Christmas Eve alone with a frozen dinner. "I was hoping we could spend Christmas together," I said, the words coming out smaller than I intended. "Like we used to." Rebecca's expression softened slightly, but not with warmth. With pity. "Oh, Marlene. We're actually going to my parents' place in Connecticut this year. Didn't Matthew tell you?" He hadn't told me. Of course he hadn't. Why would my own son think to mention that I'd be spending Christmas alone for the first time since Samuel died? I nodded, swallowing the hurt that rose in my throat like bile. "Of course. That sounds lovely. Maybe we can do something when we get back, she said, already closing the door. Thanks for the cookies. I stood on their stoop for a long moment after the door shut. A young mother pushing a stroller walked past, her toddler bundled in a red snowsuit that made him look like a tiny Santa. The child waved at me, and I waved back, remembering when Matthew was that age. How he'd run to me when I came home from my job at the insurance office, his small arms wrapping around my legs like I was the most important person in his world. The train back to Manhattan was crowded with last-minute Christmas shoppers. I sat squashed between a teenager with headphones and a businessman typing aggressively on his phone. The teenager's music leaked out, something with a heavy beat that made my head throb. The businessman kept sighing and muttering under his breath about quarterly reports and deadlines. Everyone seemed angry or stressed or desperate to be somewhere else. I pressed my forehead against the cold window and watched Brooklyn disappear into the East River. The water was gray and choppy, reminding me of Samuel's eyes during our last fight before he died. We'd argued about Matthew, actually. Samuel thought we were giving him too much, making him too dependent. He needs to stand on his own feet, Marlene, he'd said. We can't keep bailing him out every time he makes a mistake. But I defended our son. Matthew was just finding his way, I'd argued. Starting a family was expensive. He'd pay us back when things got easier. Samuel had shaken his head and walked away, his shoulders heavy with disappointment. He died of a heart attack 6 weeks later, leaving me with nothing but regret and the echo of words I couldn't take back. Back in my apartment, I put the kettle on and sat at my small kitchen table. The same table where I'd helped Matthew with his homework, where Samuel and I had planned our modest vacations to the Catskills, where I'd sorted through bills and birthday cards and all the small paperwork of a life lived together. Now it was just me and the shadows that grew longer each day as winter deepened. I opened my laptop, a gift from Matthew 2 birthdays ago, though he'd never bothered to teach me how to use most of its features. My email inbox had 3 messages, a credit card offer, a reminder about my Medicare prescription coverage, and something from my bank. I almost deleted the bank notification without reading it. I received automated messages about my checking account balance weekly, usually just confirmations of my Social Security deposit or the small pension from the insurance company. But this message looked different. The subject line read, "Returned payment notification." My heart started beating faster as I clicked it open. Dear Mrs. Patterson, we are writing to inform you that a payment of $3,247.89 made from your account on December 20th has been returned due to insufficient funds. The payment was made to First National Mortgage Services. Please contact us immediately to resolve this matter and avoid additional fees. I stared at the screen, reading the words over and over. $3,247. From my account. To a mortgage company. I hadn't made any mortgage payment. I'd paid off my apartment years ago. The small co-op maintenance fee came out automatically each month, always less than $500. My hands were shaking as I reached for my phone. I dialed the bank's customer service number, wading through what felt like hours of automated menus before finally reaching a human voice. Mrs. Patterson? Yes, I see the issue here. It looks like there's an automatic payment set up from your account to First National Mortgage. It's been processing monthly for the past 18 months. But this month the payment bounced due to insufficient funds. I never set up any automatic payments, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. Let me check the authorization details, the representative said. I could hear typing in the background. It shows here that the payment was set up online, with your account information and routing number. The authorized user is listed as Matthew Patterson. Matthew. My son had access to my bank account information. I'd given it to him 2 years ago when I'd been in the hospital with pneumonia and needed someone to pay my bills. He'd promised it was just temporary, just until I got back on my feet. But apparently, he'd never stopped using it. Ma'am? Are you still there? Yes, I whispered. I'm here. The total amount that's been paid from your account over the past 18 months is $58,461.02. Would you like me to help you file a dispute for unauthorized transactions? Nearly $60,000. Money I'd saved from 43 years of work, from Samuel's life insurance policy, from selling the car we could no longer afford to maintain. Money I'd carefully rationed to last through my remaining years, watching every penny, skipping meals sometimes to make sure there would be enough for my medications and the rising maintenance fees on my apartment. I hung up the phone without saying goodbye and sat in my kitchen as the December darkness fell over Manhattan. The Christmas lights on the building across the street blurred through my tears, becoming abstract smears of red and green and gold. I thought about all the times I'd sent Matthew money over the years. The $5,000 for his wedding, the $15,000 for the down payment on their car, the $20,000 for their house, the smaller amounts for his birthday, for emergencies, for the times Rebecca was between jobs or Matthew's consulting work was slow. I'd given freely, happily even, because that's what mothers do. We give everything we have and then find ways to give more. But this felt different. This felt like theft. I called Matthew's cell phone, my fingers fumbling over the numbers I'd dialed 1,000 times. It went straight to voicemail. "Hi, you've reached Matt Patterson. Leave a message and I'll get back to you." "Matthew, it's your mother," I said to his machine. "I need to talk to you about my bank account. Please call me tonight." He didn't call that night. Or the next morning. I tried again on December 23rd, leaving 2 more messages. Each time, my voice sounded smaller, more desperate. By Christmas Eve morning, I was pacing my tiny apartment like a caged animal, wearing a path and the faded Persian rug Samuel's mother had given us as a wedding gift. I decided to go to their house again. I needed answers, and I needed them face to face. This time, I didn't bring cookies. The train ride to Brooklyn felt different this time. Every stop, every tunnel, every stranger's face seemed hostile. The businessman from 2 days before was there again, or maybe it was a different businessman in the same gray suit with the same permanent scowl. The teenager had been replaced by a college student reading a textbook about psychology, highlighting passages in yellow marker. Her textbook fell open to a chapter about family dynamics and emotional manipulation. I looked away. When I reached their brownstone, I could see warm light glowing through their bay window. They were home. I could make out figures moving inside, the flicker of what might have been their television or perhaps a fire in their fireplace. For just a moment, I imagined walking up those steps and being welcomed inside, sitting by their fire with a cup of tea, watching my granddaughter play with new Christmas toys while Matthew and Rebecca bustled around their kitchen preparing Christmas Eve dinner. But that fantasy died as soon as I pressed their doorbell. I could hear footsteps approaching, then stopping. A shadow passed by the small window beside the door. Someone was looking out at me, deciding whether or not to answer. Finally, the door opened. But instead of Rebecca's practiced smile, I found myself face to face with my son. Matthew looked different somehow. Older, harder around the edges. His hair was shorter than the last time I'd seen him, cut in an expensive style that made him look more like a businessman and less like the boy who used to build blanket forts in our living room. "Mom," he said, blocking the doorway with his body. "What are you doing here?" "I need to talk to you," I said. "About my bank account." His jaw tightened. "I don't know what you mean." "Matthew, I know about the mortgage payments. Nearly $60,000 from my account. Money you took without asking." He looked back over his shoulder, then stepped outside, pulling the door closed behind him. "Let's take a walk," he said. We walked to the corner in silence, our breath making small clouds in the cold air. The brownstones around us glowed with warm light and Christmas decorations. Through windows, I could see families gathered around dinner tables, children playing with wrapping paper, couples sharing wine by their Christmas trees. Normal families doing normal family things on Christmas Eve. "Mom, I can explain," Matthew said finally. "I'm listening." He ran his hand through his hair, a gesture I remembered from his teenage years when he'd been caught in a lie about homework or staying out past curfew. "We were going to pay you back. I swear, we were just borrowing it." "Borrowing?" The word came out sharper than I intended. You don't borrow money by taking it from someone's bank account without permission. That's called stealing. Don't be dramatic, Mom. His voice carried an edge of irritation that cut through me like a knife. You weren't using that money anyway. It was just sitting there. It was sitting there because it's my retirement money, Matthew. It's what I live on. What I need for my medications, for my rent, for groceries. He looked at me with something that might have been pity or might have been annoyance. Mom, you live in a rent-stabilized apartment that costs practically nothing. Your medications are covered by Medicare. You don't need that much money. I stared at my son, this man I'd carried for 9 months, labored for 16 hours to bring into the world, nursed through fevers and nightmares and broken hearts. This person I'd loved more than my own life, who was now standing on a Brooklyn sidewalk on Christmas Eve telling me that my own money wasn't really mine. How would you know what I need? I asked. Because I pay attention, Mom. You never go anywhere, you never buy anything for yourself, you live like a hermit. At least this way the money is doing some good. Some good? We were 3 months behind on the mortgage, Mom. We could have lost the house. Lily could have been forced to change schools. Would you have wanted that? Lily. My granddaughter. 7 years old with Rebecca's blonde hair and Matthew's stubborn chin. I hadn't seen her since her birthday party 6 months ago, an elaborate affair in their backyard with a bouncy house and a magician and 20 children running around with juice boxes and cake. I'd brought her a handmade doll, something I'd spent weeks sewing together with scraps of fabric from my collection. She'd opened it, said, "Thank you, Grandma," and then immediately discarded it in favor of the electronic toys her parents' friends had brought. "Where is Lily?" I asked. "She's inside, playing with her Christmas presents. Today is Christmas Eve. She hasn't opened her presents yet." Matthew looked uncomfortable. "We let her open a few early. She was excited." "Can I see her?" He hesitated. "Mom, this isn't a good time. Rebecca's parents are here, and we're in the middle of dinner preparations." Rebecca's parents. The ones they were supposedly spending Christmas with in Connecticut. Another lie, stacked on top of all the others. "I'm not asking for dinner," I said. "I just want to wish my granddaughter a Merry Christmas. Maybe next week, okay? After things calm down." Always after. Always next week, next month, when things calmed down or got easier or became more convenient. I'd been waiting for after for so long that I'd forgotten what came before. We walked back to their house in silence. At the bottom of their steps, Matthew turned to me with his hands in his coat pockets. "Mom, about the money. I really will pay you back. I just need some time to get things sorted out." "How much time?" "I don't know. A year, maybe 2. Business has been slow, but it's picking up. Rebecca's talking about going back to work once Lily's a little older." "A year or 2. I was 72 years old. How many years did I have left? How many Christmas Eves would I spend alone while they figured out their finances with my money?" "I want you to stop the automatic payments," I said. His face changed, hardening into something I didn't recognize. "Mom, you can't be serious. If we can't make the mortgage payments, we'll lose the house. That's not my problem anymore, Matthew." "Not your problem?" His voice rose, and I could see neighbors' curtains twitching as they noticed our conversation. "Mom, I'm your son. Your family. How is it not your problem?" "Because you made it clear that I'm not really part of this family." He stared at me, his breath creating small puffs of vapor between us. "What's that supposed to mean?" "It means I haven't heard from you in 3 weeks. It means you lied to me about spending Christmas with Rebecca's parents when they're actually here with you. It means you've been taking money from my bank account for a year and a half without telling me. It means your wife looks at me like I'm a burden she has to tolerate." "Mom, you're being paranoid. Rebecca likes you. Rebecca tolerates me. There's a difference." He was quiet for a moment, and I thought maybe he was starting to understand. Maybe some part of the little boy who used to curl up in my lap during thunderstorms was still there, buried underneath the expensive haircut and the defensive anger. But then he shook his head. "Mom, I think you need help. Maybe you should talk to someone. This accusation about Rebecca, this paranoia about money, it's not normal." "Not normal." My son was gaslighting me, making me question my own sanity because I'd caught him stealing from me. The hurt was so deep it felt physical, like a knife between my ribs. "I'm going home," I said. "Mom, wait. Let's go inside and talk about this calmly. Rebecca made pot roast, your favorite." "My favorite." He remembered my favorite meal but forgot to call me for 3 weeks. He knew what food I liked, but not that I'd been eating canned soup and crackers for dinner most nights, trying to stretch my remaining money as far as possible. "No," I said. "I'm done, Matthew." I started walking toward the subway station, my old boots slipping slightly on the patches of ice that covered the Brooklyn sidewalks. Behind me, I heard Matthew's footsteps following. Mom, come back. Let's talk about this." I didn't turn around. I kept walking, past the boutiques and coffee shops that had replaced the corner stores and diners I remembered from when Matthew was little, past the young families who could afford to live in brownstones and send their children to private schools, past the Christmas decorations that looked perfect and expensive and absolutely nothing like the handmade ornaments and construction paper angels that had once covered our small tree. At the subway entrance, Matthew caught up with me. "Mom, please. Don't leave like this." I turned to face him one last time. My son, my only child, the person I'd loved more than anything else in the world for 38 years. "Matthew, do you love me?" The question seemed to surprise him. "Of course I love you, Mom. You're my mother." "No," I said. "Do you love me? Do you like spending time with me? Do you think about me when I'm not around? Do you miss me when we don't talk?" He opened his mouth to answer, then closed it again. His silence was more honest than any words he could have spoken. "That's what I thought," I said, and disappeared into the subway station. The train ride back to Manhattan was a blur of darkness and underground lights. I sat in my seat, staring at my reflection in the window, seeing a woman I barely recognized. When had I become so small? So forgettable? When had I started accepting crumbs and calling them love? Back in my apartment, I made a cup of tea and sat at my kitchen table with my laptop. It took me an hour to figure out how to log into my bank account online, and another 30 minutes to navigate to the automatic payments section. But finally, I found it, the monthly payment to First National Mortgage Services, set to debit $3,247.89 from my checking account every month. I clicked Cancel Payment and confirmed my choice. A small message appeared, automatic payment has been successfully cancelled. It was that simple. 18 months of theft ended with the click of a button. I called the bank's fraud department and reported the unauthorized transactions. The representative was sympathetic but warned me that recovering the money would be difficult since Matthew was my son and had technically been authorized to access my account at one point. I could file a police report, she said, but family members rarely press charges against each other. I hung up the phone and sat in my quiet apartment. Outside my window, it had started to snow, big fat flakes that caught the light from the street lamps and drifted down like confetti. It was beautiful and peaceful and completely silent. For the first time in months, I wasn't worried about mortgage payments or bank balances or whether my son would call. I was free. But freedom felt terrifyingly empty at first. I spent Christmas Day alone, watching old movies on my small television and eating a sandwich for dinner. No one called. No one knocked on my door. The building was quiet, most of my neighbors apparently away visiting family or celebrating somewhere else. I thought about all the Christmas days when Matthew was little, how he'd wake me up at dawn, dragging me to the living room to see what Santa had brought. How Samuel would make his famous Christmas morning pancakes while I opened presents with deliberate slowness, savoring each moment. Those memories felt like they belonged to someone else now. A different woman in a different life, when love was simple and family meant safety. On December 26th, my phone rang. Matthew's name appeared on the caller ID. I let it go to voicemail. He called 3 more times that day. Each time, I watched his name flash on my screen and felt absolutely nothing. No anger, no sadness, no longing to hear his voice. Just a strange, hollow peace. That evening, I finally listened to his messages. Mom, it's Matthew. I know you're upset, but we need to talk. The mortgage payment got rejected, and the bank is threatening foreclosure. I need you to reinstate the automatic payment. Call me back. Mom, it's me again. I don't know why you're not answering your phone. Rebecca thinks maybe you're having some kind of breakdown. Maybe we should call someone to check on you. Mom, this is getting ridiculous. You're being childish and vindictive. I know you're angry, but punishing Lily isn't going to solve anything. She keeps asking about Grandma. Call me back. The last message was different. His voice was softer, more like the boy I remembered. Mom, I'm sorry. I know I should have asked before setting up the automatic payment. I know I should have told you about Connecticut. I know I've been a bad son. But I'm scared, okay? I'm scared we're going to lose the house. I'm scared I can't provide for my family. I'm scared I'm failing at everything. I need your help. Please call me back. I saved the message, but I didn't call him back. Instead, I called Mrs. Rodriguez, my neighbor from the floor below. She was a widow too, had been for 15 years since her husband died in a construction accident. We'd exchanged pleasantries in the hallway over the years, but never really talked. Marlene, she said when she heard my voice. How are you, honey? Did you have a nice Christmas? Actually, Maria, I was wondering if you'd like to have coffee sometime. I feel like I don't know my neighbors well enough. I'd love that. How about tomorrow morning? I make excellent Cuban coffee. I spent the next morning in Maria's apartment, which was identical to mine in layout but completely different in feeling. Her walls were covered with photographs of her children and grandchildren, paintings her daughter had made in art school, knitted blankets in every color imaginable. Her kitchen smelled like cinnamon and coffee and something that might have been homemade bread. My Jorge, he lives in New Jersey now, she said, showing me a photograph of a man about Matthew's age with Maria's kind eyes. He calls me every Sunday, comes for dinner twice a month. His wife, she's good to me. They could afford a bigger place, but they found a house only 20 minutes away so Jorge could visit easy. That sounds wonderful, I said. What about your boy? Matthew, right? I don't see him around so much anymore. I told Maria everything. About the money, about Christmas Eve, about feeling invisible in my own son's life. She listened without judgment, occasionally making soft sounds of sympathy or shaking her head in disbelief. Marlene, she said when I finished. That's not right. Families should take care of each other, but not like that. That's taking advantage. I keep wondering if I'm being too harsh, I admitted. He's my son. My only child. Being someone's mother doesn't make you their bank account, Maria said firmly. My Jorge, when he was getting divorced, he asked to borrow money for his lawyer. $5,000. You know what he did? He wrote me a check every month until it was paid back, with interest. Because that's what you do when someone helps you. You don't just take and take and take. Over the next few weeks, I fell into a new routine. Coffee with Maria on Tuesday mornings. Grocery shopping together on Thursday afternoons. She introduced me to other neighbors I'd never really met, Mrs. Chen from the third floor, who taught me to make dumplings, Mr. Kowalski from across the hall, who shared tomatoes from the rooftop garden he tended with obsessive care. I started sleeping better. Eating regular meals. I even bought myself new clothes, nothing expensive, just a few sweaters that fit properly and made me feel like I was worth looking at in the mirror. Matthew continued calling. I continued not answering. On New Year's Day, Rebecca called. I was surprised to see her name on my phone screen. She'd never called me before, not once in the 8 years she'd been married to my son. Marlene, she said when I answered. We need to talk. About what? About Matthew. About the house. About this ridiculous silent treatment you're giving us. Her tone was different from the polite but distant voice she usually used with me. This was harder, more direct. I could hear Matthew in the background, saying something I couldn't make out. I'm not giving anyone a silent treatment, I said. I'm just choosing not to participate in conversations that don't serve me. Look, Marlene, I get that you're upset about the money thing. But Matthew explained that to you. We were desperate. The bank was going to foreclose. And that made it okay to steal from me? It wasn't stealing. You're his mother. Family helps family. Family also respects family. Family doesn't lie and manipulate and take without asking. I could hear her exhale sharply. Fine. You want an apology? Matthew's sorry. We're both sorry. Now can we move past this? It's not about an apology, Rebecca. Then what is it about? I thought about that for a moment. What was it about? It wasn't really about the money, though that had been the catalyst. It wasn't about Christmas Eve, though that had broken something inside me. It was about years of feeling invisible, unwanted, tolerated at best and ignored at worst. It's about respect, I said finally. We respect you, Marlene. No, you don't. You respect my bank account. You respect my ability to solve your problems without asking questions. But you don't respect me as a person. That's not true. When was the last time you asked about my day? Or how I'm feeling? Or whether I'm lonely? When was the last time you invited me for dinner not because you needed something from me, but because you wanted my company? Silence on the other end of the line. Rebecca, I spent last Christmas alone eating a peanut butter sandwich while you and Matthew sat down to pot roast with your parents. I haven't seen my granddaughter in 6 months. Matthew spent 18 months stealing from my retirement account and then told me it was okay because I wasn't using the money anyway. Do those sound like the actions of people who respect me? Marlene, you're being dramatic. We've been busy, that's all. Starting a family is hard, maintaining a house is expensive. We didn't mean to exclude you. Busy, I repeated. Too busy to call your husband's mother on Christmas. Too busy to notice that she's been eating canned soup for dinner because you've been stealing her grocery money. We weren't stealing, Rebecca, I interrupted. I'm 72 years old. I have maybe 10 good years left, maybe 15 if I'm lucky. I'm not going to spend those years begging for scraps of attention from people who see me as nothing more than a source of emergency cash. I could hear Matthew's voice in the background, more urgent now. Rebecca covered the phone, and I could hear them arguing in harsh whispers. The mortgage payment is due in 2 weeks, Rebecca said when she came back on the line. If we can't make it, we'll lose the house. Then you'd better figure out how to make it without my money. Marlene, please. Think about Lily. Do you want your granddaughter to be homeless? And there it was. The emotional manipulation I'd been expecting. Using my love for Lily as a weapon against me. Lily won't be homeless, I said calmly. You have options. You can sell the house and buy something smaller. You can move in with your parents. You can ask your parents for a loan. You can get second jobs. You have choices, Rebecca. You just don't want to make the hard ones. You're being cruel. I'm being realistic. For the first time in years, I'm being realistic. I hung up the phone and immediately turned it off. I didn't want to deal with the inevitable barrage of angry calls and guilt-inducing text messages that would follow. Instead, I made myself a proper dinner, chicken breast with roasted vegetables and a small glass of wine. I ate at my kitchen table with the good china, the set Samuel's mother had given us that I'd been saving for special occasions that never seemed to come. If eating dinner alone in my own apartment on New Year's Day wasn't a special occasion, what was? Over the next few weeks, things escalated in ways I hadn't anticipated. First came the emails. Long, rambling messages from Matthew about family loyalty and forgiveness and how I was destroying Lily's sense of security. Then came the social media posts. Rebecca had apparently decided to wage a passive-aggressive campaign on Facebook, posting cryptic messages about toxic family members and the importance of boundaries with narcissistic relatives. I didn't have Facebook myself, but Mrs. Chen showed me the posts on her phone. Rebecca had shared articles about elder care and dementia and financial abuse, but not the kind where adult children steal from their parents. The kind where elderly parents supposedly manipulate their adult children with money and guilt. The post that hurt the most was a photo of Lily looking sad, sitting alone on their living room floor. The caption read, "When certain people choose vindictiveness over family, it's the children who suffer most. Some grandparents care more about being right than about their grandchildren's well-being." Mrs. Chen showed me the comments, dozens of them from Rebecca's yoga friends and neighbors, all expressing sympathy and outrage on her behalf. "So sorry you're dealing with this. Family can be so toxic. You have to protect your child from unhealthy influences." I stared at the screen, reading the comments from strangers who knew nothing about our situation but were happy to judge me based on Rebecca's carefully curated narrative. In their version of events, I was the villain. The bitter old woman who was punishing an innocent child because of some petty disagreement with her parents. "Don't let it get to you," Mrs. Chen said, closing her laptop. "People believe what they want to believe. They don't know the whole story." But it did get to me. For days, I couldn't stop thinking about those comments, about how easy it was for Rebecca to paint me as the villain in our story. How quickly strangers were willing to assume the worst about a grandmother they'd never met. I started second-guessing myself. Maybe I was being too harsh. Maybe I should compromise, find some middle ground that would allow me to see Lily without enabling Matthew and Rebecca's financial irresponsibility. Then I got the call from my building super. "Mrs. Patterson? This is Jimmy from downstairs. I got some people here looking for you, but I told them I need to check with you first before I let anyone up." "What people?" "A man and a woman. They say they're from Adult Protective Services. They want to do a wellness check, make sure you're okay and capable of managing your own affairs." My blood went cold. Adult Protective Services. Someone had reported me as a vulnerable elder, possibly suffering from dementia or depression or some other condition that made me unable to care for myself. "What did you tell them?" I asked. "I told them to wait in the lobby while I called you." "Mrs. Patterson, you seem fine to me. You want me to send them away?" "No," I said after a moment. "Send them up. I have nothing to hide." 20 minutes later, I was sitting in my living room with a social worker named Janet and her supervisor, a kind-faced woman named Dorothy who reminded me of my late sister. They asked me questions about my daily routine, my medications, my finances, my relationship with my family. "We received a complaint from a concerned family member," Janet explained. "They reported that you've been exhibiting erratic behavior, making poor financial decisions, and isolating yourself from family support." "What kind of erratic behavior?" I asked. "Canceling automatic payments without explanation. Refusing to answer phone calls from family members. Making accusations against your son and daughter-in-law." I looked around my tidy apartment, at my organized pill containers and my carefully maintained budget spreadsheets and my small but healthy collection of houseplants. "Do I seem erratic to you?" Dorothy smiled. "You seem perfectly competent to me, Mrs. Patterson. Your apartment is clean, you're well-groomed, you're articulate and oriented. Can you tell us about the situation with your family?" I told them everything. The whole story, from the beginning. The years of financial support, the gradual isolation, the stolen money, the Christmas Eve confrontation. I showed them my bank statements, the cancelled automatic payment, the emails from Matthew and Rebecca. When I finished, Janet and Dorothy exchanged glances. "Mrs. Patterson," Dorothy said carefully, "what you're describing sounds less like elder abuse by family members, and more like the opposite." "The opposite?" "It sounds like your family members were financially exploiting you, and when you put a stop to it, they retaliated by trying to have your competency questioned." I felt a mixture of relief and rage. Relief that these neutral third parties could see the truth of the situation. Rage that my own son had tried to have me declared mentally incompetent because I'd refused to continue funding his lifestyle. "Unfortunately, this is more common than you might think," Janet said. "Adult children sometimes become dependent on financial support from their parents, and when that support ends, they respond with manipulation and guilt. Sometimes they even try to have their parents declared incompetent so they can gain control of their assets." "Is there anything I should be worried about?" I asked. "We'll close this case with a finding that you're perfectly capable of managing your own affairs," Dorothy said. "But you might want to consider speaking with an attorney about protecting your assets. And document everything. Keep records of all communications with your family members, all financial transactions, any attempts at manipulation or coercion. After they left, I sat in my quiet apartment and tried to process what had just happened. My son had tried to have me declared mentally incompetent. My own child, the person I'd loved and supported and sacrificed for, had attempted to use the legal system to gain control over my life and my money. The betrayal was so deep it felt like physical injury. That evening, I called Maria and told her what had happened. She listened in shocked silence, occasionally making soft exclamations of disbelief in Spanish. Ay, Dios mío, Marlene. How can he do that to his own mother? I don't know, I said honestly. I don't understand who he's become. You know what I think? Maria said. I think maybe he was always like this, but you didn't want to see it. Sometimes we love people so much that we make excuses for them, even when they don't deserve it. I thought about that. Had Matthew always been selfish? Had there always been signs that I'd chosen to ignore? I remembered his teenage years, the way he'd throw tantrums when he didn't get what he wanted, the way he'd manipulated Samuel and me against each other when it served his purposes. I'd called it normal teenage behavior, assured myself he'd grow out of it. Maybe he'd never grown out of it. Maybe he'd just gotten more sophisticated in his methods. 2 days later, I received a lawyer letter from a firm in Brooklyn. Matthew and Rebecca were suing me for elder financial abuse and demanding that I reinstate the automatic mortgage payments as part of an informal family support agreement that they claimed we'd had for years. The letter was full of legal language I didn't understand, but the message was clear: they were trying to use the courts to force me to continue giving them money. I took the letter to a free legal aid clinic in Chinatown that Mrs. Chen had told me about. The lawyer who reviewed my case was a young woman named Sarah who spoke with me for over an hour, taking careful notes and asking detailed questions about my relationship with Matthew and Rebecca. Mrs. Patterson, she said when I finished telling my story, this lawsuit is frivolous. There's no such thing as an informal family support agreement that would be legally binding. Adult children have no legal right to their parents' money, period. So they can't force me to keep paying their mortgage? Absolutely not. In fact, based on what you've told me, you might have grounds for a countersuit against them for the money they took without your permission. I considered that. The idea of suing my own son felt impossible, even after everything he'd done to me. I don't want their money back, I said finally. I just want them to leave me alone. That's understandable. We can respond to their lawsuit, get it dismissed, and file for a restraining order if necessary. A restraining order. Against my own son. The child I'd rocked to sleep, taught to ride a bicycle, cheered for at Little League games and school plays and his college graduation. Let me think about it, I said. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, listening to the sounds of the city outside my window. Sirens, car horns, the occasional shout from someone on the street. The sounds of life continuing, of people going about their business while my world felt like it was falling apart. At 3 a.m, I got up and made myself a cup of tea. I sat at my kitchen table with the lawyer letter spread out in front of me, reading it over and over. The language was cold and clinical, reducing 38 years of motherhood to a series of financial transactions and legal obligations. I thought about the Matthew I'd raised. The little boy who used to bring me dandelions from the park and call them flowers for mommy. The teenager who'd cried in my arms after his first heartbreak. The college student who'd called me every Sunday just to talk about his classes and his friends and his dreams for the future. Where had that person gone? When had he become this stranger who sued his own mother for money? Or maybe the real question was, had that loving son ever really existed, or had I created him in my imagination because I needed to believe I was loved? The next morning, I called Sarah and told her to respond to the lawsuit. I didn't want to sue Matthew for the money he'd stolen, but I wasn't going to let him use the legal system to steal more. We'll get this dismissed quickly, she assured me. And Mrs. Patterson? You're doing the right thing. You don't owe your adult son a house. Over the next few weeks, as Sarah worked on my legal response, I started building a new life for myself. I joined a senior center in Chinatown, where I took a watercolor painting class and learned to play mahjong. I volunteered at a local food bank, sorting donations and packing bags for families in need. The volunteer work felt especially meaningful. Many of the families we served were struggling with housing, just like Matthew and Rebecca claimed to be. But these families applied for assistance, filled out paperwork, followed rules. They didn't lie and steal and manipulate to get what they needed. I started making friends among the other volunteers. Women my age who understood what it meant to be alone, to feel forgotten by family members too busy with their own lives to remember where they came from. One of these women was Eleanor, a retired teacher whose daughter lived in California and called every few months, when she remembered. Eleanor had been supporting her son's gambling addiction for 15 years, she told me, giving him money whenever he claimed to be getting evicted or having his car repossessed. I knew he was lying, she said one day as we packed bags of rice and canned goods. But I kept giving him money because I was afraid if I stopped, I'd never see him again. What made you stop? I asked. He stole my jewelry, she said simply. My mother's engagement ring, my grandmother's pearls. Family heirlooms that were supposed to be passed down to his children someday. He pawned them for gambling money and then lied about it until I found the pawn shop receipts in his car. Did you press charges? No. But I changed my locks and closed the joint bank account and told him he wasn't welcome in my home until he got clean and sober. She paused, considering. That was 3 years ago. I haven't heard from him since. Do you miss him? Eleanor was quiet for a long moment. I miss the son I thought I had. But I don't miss the anxiety and the stolen money and the constant lies. I sleep better now. I don't jump every time the phone rings, wondering what crisis he's going to ask me to solve. I understood exactly what she meant. The lawsuit was dismissed in February, just as Sarah had predicted. The judge called it frivolous and an abuse of the legal system. Matthew and Rebecca were ordered to pay my legal costs, though Sarah warned me I probably shouldn't expect to actually see that money. I didn't care about the money. I cared about the vindication, the official recognition that I wasn't crazy or vindictive or financially abusive. I was just a mother who'd finally learned to say no. That evening, I celebrated by cooking myself a Royale dinner, pot roast with potatoes and carrots, the same meal Rebecca had claimed was my favorite. I ate by candlelight, using my good china and crystal glasses, toasting myself with a glass of wine. For the first time in months, I felt truly peaceful. Spring came early that year. By March, the trees outside my window were budding, and I could smell fresh air when I opened my windows instead of the stale cold of winter. I started taking walks in the neighborhood, exploring parts of the Lower East Side I'd never really noticed before. There was a community garden on Rivington Street where elderly Chinese women grew vegetables and flowers in small plots. They didn't speak much English, but they smiled and nodded when I walked by, sometimes offering me cherry tomatoes or herbs from their gardens. Their kindness was simple and uncomplicated, with no ulterior motives or hidden agendas. On one of these walks, I ran into someone unexpected, my granddaughter Lily. She was with a woman I didn't recognize, probably a babysitter or nanny, playing on a playground near Houston Street. I almost didn't recognize her at first. She'd grown taller, her blonde hair longer, her face more mature. 8 years old now, no longer a baby. I stood at the edge of the playground, watching her play. She was on the swings, pumping her legs to go higher, her face bright with pure joy. She looked so much like Matthew at that age that it made my chest ache. The babysitter noticed me first. She was a young Latina woman, probably in her 20s, and she looked concerned when she saw me staring. "Are you okay?" she asked in accented English. "I'm fine," I said. That's my granddaughter." Her expression changed, becoming wary. "You're Matthew's mother?" So she knew about me. Whatever version of the story Matthew and Rebecca had told her. "Yes," I said simply. She glanced back at Lily, who was now trying to do tricks on the monkey bars, then back at me. They said you were sick. That you couldn't see Lily anymore." "I'm not sick," I said. "I'm perfectly healthy." The babysitter looked confused, caught between her employer's story and the evidence of her own eyes. I was clearly not the demented old woman Matthew and Rebecca had described. "Would it be okay if I just said hello to her?" I asked. "I haven't seen her in almost a year." The babysitter hesitated, then nodded. "Okay. But just for a minute." I walked over to the play structure where Lily was now climbing a rope ladder. "Lily?" She looked down, and her face lit up with recognition. "Grandma Marlene." She scrambled down the ladder and ran to me, throwing her arms around my waist in a hug that nearly knocked me over. She smelled like sunscreen and playground dust and something sweet, maybe the remnants of a juice box. "I missed you so much," she said, her voice muffled against my sweater. "I missed you too, sweetheart." She pulled back to look at me. "Mommy said you were sick and couldn't see me anymore." "But you don't look sick." Out of the mouths of babes. "I'm not sick, Lily. I'm fine." "Then why can't I see you?" How do you explain adult selfishness and financial manipulation to an 8-year-old? How do you tell a child that her parents are using her as a weapon in their war against her grandmother? "Sometimes grown-ups have disagreements," I said carefully. "But that doesn't mean I don't love you. I drew you a picture for Christmas," she said suddenly. "But Daddy said I couldn't send it because you wouldn't want it." The casual cruelty of it took my breath away. They'd let this child believe that I didn't want her drawings, her handmade gifts, her love. I would love any picture you made for me, I told her. I would treasure it. Really? Really? The babysitter was watching us nervously, checking her phone. Probably texting Matthew or Rebecca about this unexpected encounter. Lily, honey, we need to go, she said after a few minutes. But I just found Grandma. I know, sweetie, but your parents are expecting us home. Lily looked at me with tears in her eyes. Will I see you again? I wanted to promise her yes, but I didn't want to lie. I hope so, sweetheart. I really hope so. She hugged me again, tighter this time, and I memorized the feel of her small arms around me, the weight of her head against my shoulder, the trust in her embrace. After they left, I sat on a park bench and cried. Not the silent, dignified tears I'd been shedding for months, but ugly, wrenching sobs that came from a place so deep I'd forgotten it existed. A passing jogger stopped to ask if I was okay. An elderly man walking his dog offered me his handkerchief. The kindness of strangers, while my own family painted me as a villain. That evening, I got a furious phone call from Rebecca. How dare you approach Lily without permission, she said, her voice shaking with anger. We have a babysitter who's now afraid she's going to lose her job because she let you talk to our daughter. I said hello to my granddaughter in a public park, I replied calmly. That's not a crime. We told you to stay away from us. That includes Lily. You told me to stay away from you. Lily is my granddaughter, and I have every right to speak to her if I encounter her in public. We could get a restraining order. Based on what? Saying hello to my granddaughter and telling her I love her. Rebecca was quiet for a moment, probably realizing how that would sound to a judge. Marlene, you're confusing her. She came home asking why we told her you were sick when you're clearly fine. Then maybe you should stop lying to her. We're trying to protect her from your toxic behavior. My toxic behavior? Rebecca, your husband spent 18 months stealing from me, then tried to have me declared mentally incompetent when I put a stop it. You filed a frivolous lawsuit against me and spread lies about me on social media. But I'm the toxic one for saying hello to my granddaughter. You're trying to turn her against us. I'm not trying to turn her against anyone. I'm trying to maintain a relationship with a child I love, despite her parents' best efforts to prevent it. If you contact her again, we'll call the police. And tell them what? That a grandmother talked to her granddaughter? Good luck with that. I hung up the phone, but I was shaking. Not from fear, but from rage. They were using Lily as a pawn, poisoning her mind against me, making her believe I didn't want to see her. It was emotional abuse, and there was nothing I could do to stop it. Or was there? The next morning, I called Sarah and asked about grandparents' rights. It's complicated, she said. New York does have grandparents' rights laws, but they're limited. You'd have to prove that it's in Lily's best interest to maintain a relationship with you, and that the parents are unreasonably denying access. Would filing a frivolous lawsuit against me count as unreasonable? Possibly. Also the fact that they lied to your granddaughter about you being sick, and that they've been alienating her from you without cause. We might have a case. I thought about it for several days. Did I really want to take my son and daughter-in-law to court for the right to see my granddaughter? Did I want to put Lily through the confusion and stress of a custody battle? But then I thought about her face when she saw me at the playground. The pure joy, the love, the hurt when she realized I wouldn't be coming to visit anymore. Did I have the right to abandon her just because her parents were impossible? I decided to file for grandparents' visitation rights. The court proceedings were emotionally brutal. Matthew and Rebecca hired an expensive lawyer who painted me as an unstable, vindictive woman who was harassing their family. They brought up my age, suggested I might be developing dementia, claimed I was a negative influence on Lily. But Sarah was prepared. She had documentation of their financial exploitation, their frivolous lawsuit, their lies to adult protective services. She had character witnesses, Maria, Mrs. Chen, Eleanor from the food bank, even Jimmy the building super. All testified that I was competent, stable, and capable of maintaining a healthy relationship with my granddaughter. The judge was a woman in her 50s with kind eyes and a no-nonsense attitude. She listened to both sides carefully, reviewed all the evidence, and then made her decision. It's clear to this court that the relationship between Mrs. Patterson and her son and daughter-in-law has deteriorated significantly. However, the court finds no evidence that Mrs. Patterson poses any danger to the minor child Lily Patterson. In fact, the evidence suggests that the child benefits from her grandmother's presence in her life. She granted me supervised visitation rights, 4 hours every other Saturday, with visits to be supervised by a neutral third party until the family situation stabilized. It wasn't everything I wanted, but it was something. It meant I could see Lily, talk to her, maintain our relationship despite her parents' attempts to sever it. Matthew and Rebecca were furious, but there was nothing they could do. The court had spoken. My first supervised visit with Lily was at a family center in Manhattan, overseen by a social worker named Janet, ironically, the same Janet who'd come to my apartment for the wellness check months earlier. She remembered me and smiled when she saw us together. "How are you doing, Mrs. Patterson? You look well." "I'm doing much better, thank you." Lily was shy at first, uncertain in the sterile environment of the family center. But gradually, she warmed up. We played board games, did puzzles, read books together. She told me about school, about her friends, about the art class she was taking after school. "I'm learning to paint with watercolors," she said proudly. "Just like you." She didn't know about my watercolor classes at the senior center, but somehow she'd absorbed the information that I was interested in art. Children understand more than we think they do. As the weeks went by, our visits became more natural. Lily started looking forward to our Saturdays together. She would bring me drawings, tell me stories about her week, ask me about my life. "Grandma, why don't Mommy and Daddy want me to see you?" she asked one day, the question I'd been dreading. "Sometimes adults have disagreements that don't have anything to do with children," I said carefully. "But that doesn't change how much I love you." "Do you love Daddy too?" I paused, considering how to answer honestly without damaging her relationship with her father. "I love the daddy you have, and I love the little boy he used to be. But sometimes people change, and relationships become complicated." She thought about this with the serious expression children get when they're trying to understand the adult world. Like when Sarah Morrison stopped being my friend because she wanted to be friends with the popular girls instead. Something like that. Over the months, I watched Lily grow and change. She lost 2 teeth, learned to ride a bigger bike, started playing soccer. I celebrated every milestone, treasured every drawing, saved every story she told me. The supervised visits eventually became unsupervised as the court-appointed social worker determined that I posed no risk to Lily's well-being. By the time she turned 9, I was picking her up from school occasionally, taking her to museums and parks, having her over to my apartment for dinner. My apartment had changed by then. It was brighter, more cheerful, filled with Lily's artwork and photos of our adventures together. I'd bought a small television for her to watch her favorite shows when she visited. I'd learned to make the snacks she liked, discovered which books she wanted me to read to her. But more importantly, I'd learned to enjoy my own company. The hours when Lily wasn't with me were no longer empty or lonely. I had my art class, my volunteer work, my friendships with Maria and Mrs. Chen and Eleanor. I had a life that was independent of my relationships with other people, a life that belonged entirely to me. One evening in late fall, almost a year after the court case, I was making dinner in my kitchen when my phone rang. It was a number I didn't recognize, but something made me answer. "Mom?" Matthew's voice, uncertain and quiet. I hadn't heard from him in months, not since the court proceedings ended. "Hello, Matthew. I wanted to call. To talk." "About what?" "About everything. About what happened between us. About Lily. About the way things ended." I sat down at my kitchen table, the same table where I discovered his theft almost a year ago. "I'm listening. I know I hurt you. I know I was wrong to take money from your account without asking. I know I was wrong to try to have you declared incompetent. I know I was wrong about a lot of things." His voice cracked slightly on the last few words, and for a moment he sounded like the little boy he used to be. "Yes," I said simply. "You were wrong about a lot of things. I was scared, Mom. I was drowning financially, and I couldn't figure out how to fix it. I felt like such a failure as a husband and father, and it was easier to blame you than to take responsibility for my own mistakes." I waited for him to continue. "We lost the house," he said quietly. "We couldn't make the payments after you stopped helping, and the bank foreclosed. We're living in a rental now, something we can actually afford." I felt a flicker of sympathy, quickly followed by irritation. "Matthew, you could have avoided losing the house by asking for help instead of stealing. You could have explained your situation, worked out a payment plan, found other solutions. Instead, you chose to lie and manipulate and steal. I know. I know that now. Do you? Or are you just sorry because you got caught?" A long pause. I think I was always selfish. Even as a kid. You and Dad always gave me everything I wanted, fixed every problem I had, bailed me out of every mistake. I never learned how to handle failure or disappointment on my own." I thought about this. Was that true? Had Samuel and I enabled Matthew's selfishness by always rescuing him from consequences? "Maybe we did make things too easy for you," I admitted. "But that doesn't excuse what you did. You're 38 years old, Matthew. You're responsible for your own choices." "I know. And I'm trying to make better choices now. I got a second job." Rebecca went back to work. We're living within our means for the first time in years. It's hard, but it feels better than always being in debt, always depending on someone else to solve our problems. That's good, Matthew. That's what you should have done from the beginning. Another pause. Lily talks about you all the time. About the things you do together, the places you go. She loves you so much, Mom. I love her too. I know you do. And I know she's better off having you in her life. Even if Rebecca and I aren't part of that relationship right now. It was the closest thing to an apology I was likely to get from him. Not perfect, but honest in a way that gave me hope. Matthew, I need you to understand something. I still love you. You're my son, and that will never change. But I can't have you in my life if you're going to lie to me or steal from me or try to manipulate me. I won't go back to being your personal bank or your emotional punching bag. I understand. Do you? Because this isn't about forgiveness. I can forgive you and still maintain boundaries. I can love you and still protect myself from your bad choices. I understand, he said again, and this time I believed him. If you want to rebuild a relationship with me, it has to be based on honesty and mutual respect. No more lies, no more manipulation, no more taking advantage of my love for you. Okay? And you need to stop poisoning Lily against me. She shouldn't have to choose between loving her parents and loving her grandmother. You're right. I'll talk to Rebecca. We'll figure out how to make this work. It wasn't a perfect conversation, but it was a beginning. I didn't trust Matthew yet. Trust would have to be earned back slowly, through consistent actions over time. But for the first time in over a year, I had hope that we might someday have a healthy relationship. That Christmas, I wasn't alone. Lily spent Christmas Eve afternoon with me, helping me bake cookies and decorate my small tree. We made ornaments from construction paper and glitter, the kind of messy, imperfect decorations I'd always loved but Rebecca had never allowed in her perfectly styled home. Matthew knocked on my door that evening as I was walking Lily back to the lobby to meet Rebecca. Mom, he said, standing in my doorway with his hands in his pockets. Merry Christmas. Merry Christmas, Matthew. He looked around my apartment, taking in the changes I'd made over the past year. The bright curtains, the artwork from my painting classes, the photos of Lily and me scattered throughout. The place looks good, he said. You look good too. Happy. I am happy. He nodded, seeming to understand something he might not have grasped before. I'm glad. Rebecca appeared in the hallway behind him, looking uncomfortable but not openly hostile. Hello, Marlene. Rebecca. Thank you for watching Lily today. She had a wonderful time. It was a small gesture, but significant. An acknowledgement that I was good for Lily, that my relationship with her had value. As they walked away down the hall, Lily turned back to wave at me. I love you, Grandma. I love you too, sweetheart. I closed my door and looked around my quiet apartment. Not empty now, but peaceful. Full of memories and possibilities, decorated with love instead of loneliness. I poured myself a glass of wine and sat by my small Christmas tree, watching the lights blink in patterns that reminded me of the city outside my window. Constant motion, constant change, but also constant beauty for those who knew how to look for it. At 73, I was starting over. Building a life that belonged to me, based on my choices rather than other people's needs. It wasn't the life I'd imagined when I was younger, when I thought family meant unconditional support and endless sacrifice. But it was a good life. Maybe even a better life than the one I'd lost. I've learned that love doesn't require you to accept abuse. That being someone's mother doesn't make you their servant or their bank account. That you can forgive people while still protecting yourself from their bad behavior. Most importantly, I've learned that you're never too old to start over, to build boundaries, to choose yourself. The hardest lesson of my life was this: sometimes the family you're born into isn't where you find your peace. And sometimes, standing alone is the bravest act of love there is. Have you ever lived, or known someone who lived, something like this? Have you found yourself giving and giving until there was nothing left, only to be treated like the villain when you finally said enough? Please share your story in the comments. Your voice matters, and you're not alone. If this story touched you, please like this video and subscribe. It helps me continue opening my heart and sharing these difficult truths. Maybe together, we can help someone else find the courage to choose themselves, even when it's the hardest thing they've ever done. Thank you for listening. Thank you for caring. And remember, you are never too old to choose love, especially love for yourself.